If you have not been paying attention to the AI space and what's been going on, DeepSeek is all over everywhere right now for a lot of different things. Now, I'm not going to sit and get into every single one and share thoughts on every aspect of it, because I've been in a ton of conversations with a lot of different people, and there's still a lot that people are going, we really technically don't know yet. So let's give it a little bit of time. But it's worth talking about because of how much this thing has just dominated the news feed. It completely crashed Nvidia's stock. Now it's back for good reasons. But anyway, if you're not familiar, DeepSeek is a generative AI, I would say multimodal AI, that has come out of China. It's garnered a ton of attention because of how quickly it seems to be developed, how inexpensively it seems to have been developed, and how powerful and effective of a model it is, really challenging the notion and the status quo of what it takes to build some of this technology. Now, here's where I think we got to be really, really careful with it, because I'm seeing it spark all sorts of stuff, and I'm going to talk specifically about a few of the big ones. The first one that I think this highlights is that it's fueling this whole rage and arms war between China and the U.S., and I don't really appreciate that. In many regards, I've heard from tech leaders and talked to tech leaders who they're very angry about what China's done, and they're very skeptical, and they're throwing shade over here and throwing into question all this stuff. And in many ways, I feel like many people almost need a lesson in sportsmanship 101, where, yes, I get it. Some of these other companies may have paved the way for things, and now another person has come into the ballgame and in some ways have one-upped you. And that's not fun when somebody one-ups you, or maybe didn't go through the same path you did. And I see this in leaders all the time, where they had to forge a path, so they kind of want the people behind them to have to forge the same path, and they get a little frustrated when the people behind them have an easier time. And it's like, well, that's kind of poor sportsmanship. So to the folks who are anti-DeepSeek because you go, well, they didn't go through all the effort, and really it's like, can't we just recognize it's a win? Because I was in a conversation with somebody the other day about how it was like a female tech guru who started this, young female tech entrepreneur who came up with this. Like, shouldn't we be celebrating that? And I see a lot of nationalist, honestly, sometimes racist behavior coming out, this kind of anti-China thing. And I don't like it when I see that, because it's like, yes, okay, are there things we should discuss and be careful about? And I'll talk about some of those things related to it. Yes, but be careful that your discernment isn't actually thinly veiled racism for the Chinese. Like, they're people, they are intelligent, they're made in the image of God too. Like, this attitude of like China bad, America good, I don't like where it comes out in certain ways. And then it's kind of masked in this, oh, well, we're saying that in the name of national security. It's like, are you really though? Or is this really just your own personal disdain for a certain group of people that is coming out in a different flavor? So I think we got to be really, really careful about that. And yes, I will talk about some of the risks and some of the things, because DeepSeek has dominated the market now. There is more downloaded now than even OpenAI and ChatGPT, which is causing all sorts of stir. But I think we got to be careful that some of these feelings we have that, well, it's China and they're bad, and so we shouldn't trust it. It's like, well, okay, hang on. Like, what's the real heart behind that? I've seen some arguments and heated debates about the costs, which is fair in that, there are certain headlines. And if you watch the headlines, you'll see things like, they did everything OpenAI did for $6 million. So this completely blows the lid off the costs of AI development. Just so you know, that is not an accurate representation of how much it costs for DeepSeek to do the work it did. Not to mention, going back to what I originally said, if someone paves a road through the jungle You don't get to go, well, I made it just as far in the jungle and I did it faster and for less money. Well, no kidding. Duh. Somebody else paved the way. And you see this coming up with OpenAI's now starting to accuse them of, well, you stole our IP or you borrowed from us. So, this isn't really yours type of a thing. So you got to be a little bit careful that you don't overcredit what DeepSeek did and go, see, this is why things shouldn't cost any money because they were able to do it. Now, the exciting part is I do think that this is going to drive some really healthy competition into the market that is going to bring down some of these astronomical prices. I think the other thing that is really encouraging about it is proving that it is possible to develop this stuff for significantly less money and without all the technology, the most advanced technology that's out there, which in some ways is what some Americans are extremely pissed off about. It's not fun when you've had all the advantages, all the money, all the, perks, and you do something great. And then someone comes along behind you and they don't have any of the things or has significantly less of the things that you had and pull the same thing off. So I get it, but I think we got to be really careful where this goes and what our attitudes and our hearts are about it, because this is starting to bring out some really, really unhealthy behavior that I think anybody who is following my stuff or just following the tech sphere or all this, you should need to check that in yourself, because like I said, I'm seeing a lot of really what I would say is not okay behavior, and it's being justified behind the name of, security or, American, pride in our country type of a thing. It's like, nah, that's not okay. So let's celebrate the victory. I think there's going to be some really good things that can come out of it for the technology sphere and where we're going. And I think it challenges some of the previous assumptions that, well, the only way you can do it is this. Obviously not. And I think that's good for a lot of reasons as we move forward with some of this. I think it also raises a little bit of concern, or it should, for people, that it's like, oh, whoa, and granted, the narrative that they just came out of nowhere, a complete, out of thin air, they popped up, that's not an accurate representation either. But it does show how quickly and how powerfully organizations can come potentially disrupt. I mean, that's what's sending shockwaves right now, is the fact that DeepSeek comes out of nowhere and now bumps OpenAI down. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this kind of stuff as these open source models come out and people are able to kind of take it, do their own work on it, and all of a sudden come out with a better product and disrupt the big dogs. And whenever you do that, you make people mad. So you got to understand some of the dynamics that are going on here when you read a headline, because you'll read some certain things. You're like, what are people actually angry about? And what are they actually so upset about? And some of the stuff is like, well, boy, OpenAI is super mad about what DeepSeek did and is accusing it of, borrowing, stealing from them to train their AI. And they're claiming you stole our IP and all this stuff. It's like, OpenAI doesn't feel so good on the receiving end, right? Like, how about all these accusations of you scraping people's content without their consent, scraping all this stuff to train your AI? And you're going, hey, we didn't do anything. It's out there for anybody. But now another company does it with your stuff and you're not so happy about it. So shoes on the other foot. And this is the kind of stuff that we need to be prepared to see happen regularly, because this AI world is, I mean, if you think things are moving fast, they're only going to move faster, and things are going to get disrupted left and right. But like I said, I'm encouraged because I think it challenges a lot of the assumptions people have held about where we're going. I'm excited because I've seen, some of the stories behind where this came from and all this other stuff. And I think that's pretty cool. I don't think we should just be throwing shade on somebody because of the country it came from. I don't think that's appropriate. Now, that said, okay, anybody who's listened to me for long knows that I'm not just all one-sided or things like there's some complexity behind it. I think it's very interesting that as it's coming out of China, there are a lot of things we don't know about how it's because it's a foreign company doing this. We don't necessarily know its data practices, what it's doing, what involvement does the Chinese government have with it, which would be a bit hypocritical for us to say, given the fact the American government is involved with our American tech. And can we say the same thing? So, is where I'm saying this not as a, oh, China bad, saying that's a legitimate concern that I think we should be concerned across both fronts. But I think some of the videos that I saw recently are yet another reason why we have to be so careful as individuals when we look to AI for support, for help, for assistance, for whatever. Because there are some videos floating around on the web of, AI redacting certain things or only presenting certain things about Taiwan or the Chinese government, or if you're talking to it about certain things that we know are off limits in China. Of course, what do you think the model is going to do? You think it's going to talk about it openly? And so there's videos circulating of, oh, look at this. I ask it this question, it'll answer, and then it'll wipe the response back. And so it's easy to point the finger at that and go, see, that's what makes DeepSeek bad. I agree that there is risk to that. And I agree that there are legitimate concerns for why we should be careful to just dump OpenAI and have everyone go use DeepSeek instead. Okay. I understand the risks that people are flagging with this. At the same time, I would say those risks are things that every single person should be taking seriously as they think about the use of AI in general. Because just because a model was made in the US doesn't mean the same kinds of things can't happen or aren't happening or all this other stuff. So remember, you're an end user. You're not the one actually defining the governance and the barriers and the parameters for these models. So you don't really know that it's objective and truly bringing in everything that's out there. Somebody somewhere is filtering what you get. So I say that as a caution, not only with DeepSeek, because are there potentially some legitimate concerns about the American people all dumping OpenAI and going and using a free OpenAI or free OpenAI alternative, and now they're pouring all their content and all their stuff and all this other stuff into it. Yeah, I agree that we should be doing that carefully. And if you're somebody who just dumped OpenAI and said, sweet, I'm going to go over to DeepSeek and use all my stuff, think carefully, just like you should be thinking carefully with OpenAI. I think that's my only caution, is the sword cuts both ways. And so as we jump into this, we need to be doing that with any of the technology that's coming out. It doesn't matter if it's coming from China. It doesn't matter if it's coming from the US. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. So more is going to come out on this. It's going to be really interesting to see how this establishes where things go. Interestingly, today, Alibaba has already come out, another Chinese company, with an AI model that they say beats DeepSeek. And I think largely we're going to see more of these models, whether it's China or other countries, that come to the surface, because what DeepSeek did is it really disrupted OpenAI. Now, again, we could sit and speculate on the motives and what's really behind it and all this other stuff. I don't think that's helpful. But I think what we're going to see is we're going to start seeing these big competitive models really start to throw competition into the market. And we as consumers need to be mindful and thoughtful about what we're putting out there, how we're using them, how integrated are we doing it. We don't always think, well, the data's on my computer, so it's mine. It's like, not necessarily. And that's not just DeepSeek, that's any of the models, just for the record. So let's see what happens. I'm curious to see how OpenAI goes about trying to go after DeepSeek legally for supposedly, stealing their IP and their work to create their models. It will probably set some legal precedents, might start to help some of these things. Again, it's going to be interesting to see how they walk that line, because in some ways they're being very hypocritical in what they're doing. So anyway, that's where things are. I have played around with DeepSeek. It's an impressive model. I'm impressed with its performance. Its pricing is pretty incredible. I can see why a lot of people are going, so maybe we should just throw all our eggs in that basket. If that's where you're going, I would caution you there, and not because, it's from China. I would just say, like, hey, we don't know enough about this yet. It's still relatively new. And I think there's some work that needs to be done to understand it, as there is with some of these other companies that anybody who's looking to integrate AI into their personal life or into their business should be asking.